Be glad in the Lord always. Again I say, be glad. Let your gentleness show in your treatment of all people. The Lord is near. Don't be anxious about anything. Rather, bring up all your requests to God and your prayers and petitions, along with giving thanks. Then the peace of God that exceeds all understanding will keep your hearts and minds safe in Christ Jesus. Philippians 4:4-7, Common English Bible.
There is a character that you might have seen if you are someone who frequents Facebook, at least from time to time, called Grumpy Cat. Grumpy Cat is intended to make us smile and laugh, but Grumpy Cat looks like a very grumpy cat. And there are usually some kind of sayings that go along with Grumpy Cat. It's a Facebook meme. I'm not exactly sure what the word meme means, but it's one of the latest words in our vocabulary, I guess. But if you get online and you see Grumpy Cat, you might see something like this. Maybe. Won't come up. All right. Well, the one I had for you said Grumpy Cat. It had Grumpy Cat on it, and it said, "If you're happy and you know it, go away." And there was another one very similar. "If you're happy and you know it, leave me alone." And we see things such as Grumpy Cat, and we watch, we think it's funny. But you know, in my observations of the world, both in the online world and in the walking around in the real world, Grumpy Cat is a whole lot more like us than what we would really like to admit. I mean, we think Grumpy Cat's funny, but we've gotten in the last several years to be a pretty grumpy lot. And that, friends, bothers me. Even within the church, we have gotten to be pretty grumpy folks. Even among people, maybe they're not church folks, but they still claim to be Christians. They will put a lot of Facebook stuff out there that they are Christian, and they're still pretty angry, pretty upset, pretty grumpy. And what does that say to the world about we who are supposed to have the answers to life's most important question? We know the answer is Jesus. And yet, we're a lot like Grumpy Cat. If you're happy and you know it, leave me alone. Get away from me. Grumpy Cat is a very telling thing. Have you ever met anybody like that? I mean, met a person who's never happy? There are a lot of different kinds of examples that we could meet, but talk about that there are a lot of those people. I mean, there are people who are never, ever satisfied with anything that goes on. The picture I had online for this morning, on the display this morning, if we could ever get past the technical difficulties we keep having, but the picture that I had showed this guy standing in front of a mirror. Now, he is really big and buff. I mean, Mr. Atlas kind of looking guy, and he's looking at his reflection in the mirror, and what he's seeing is the wimp on the beach that gets sand kicked at him. Because he's not satisfied with who he is. He needs something more. It's got to be bigger. It's got to be better. He's not satisfied. And there are a lot of people like that. That whatever they might have in life, they're not satisfied with that. Think about the character in the movie, the Margaret Mitchell novel that became a movie back in the, I guess it was the 30s, maybe the 40s, I don't know, Gone with the Wind. It was before my time. I remember seeing the movie, but I wasn't around when it came out. But Scarlett O'Hara was this spoiled, rotten child at the beginning of the movie who had everything she could want except one thing: Ashley Wilkes. She wanted Ashley in the worst way. The only thing is that at a time when many families still arranged marriages, Ashley had already been promised to Melanie. I wrote all of this out, and I'm having to really think about it, because I've only seen the movie once and I've never read the book. But Melanie and Ashley get married, and then in a fit of jealousy, Scarlett marries Melanie's brother, who dies in the Civil War. And also during the Civil War, Scarlett loses everything except her beloved plantation terror. And somewhere along the way, Scarlett meets up with Rhett Butler, the dashing older bachelor who loves Scarlett. And they get married, but Scarlett still really wants Ashley. And then Melanie dies, making Ashley available again. And suddenly Scarlett realizes that what she wanted in Ashley was really not love, it was a childish infatuation, and that she was really in love with Rhett, who, while this is going on, is at home packing up because he's decided he will never have Scarlett's love, and she comes racing back to the plantation, and we hear his famous "Frankly, my dear" line. And once again, Scarlett has everything but the thing that she thinks she wants the most. It'll make her happy. You see, friends, when we put our happiness in people, it's not going to work. It's going to fail. Because people are human, and they're going to make mistakes. They're going to make bad decisions, and some of those sometimes are going to affect us. And when that happens, and we put our happiness in them, well, let's just say that when our happiness is in people, they're going to let us down. And we're not going to be happy. And then there are those people who put their happiness in stuff. I'll be happy when I have that new car. I didn't put it in the PowerPoint, and I just now thought about it, but I could have shown you a picture of my midlife crisis car. I'm not going out to buy it. I'm not having a midlife crisis, but if I was going to buy one, it would be a yellow Dodge Charger. I mean, that's the one I want. I mean, but I recognize that what I'm driving today accomplishes the purpose of a car. There's an old television commercial where this guy is talking about cars, and he says, the purpose of a car is not to get from point A to point B. The purpose of the car is the car. He's wrong. Because the purpose of a car is to transport us from point A to point B. And as much as I love the look of that yellow Charger, that old blue Kia Sorento accomplishes the purpose of the car, to get me to the places I need to go. Friends, if we put our happiness in stuff, it may make us momentarily happy, but sooner or later the new is going to wear off. Cindy will tell you Keith's happy when he gets a new guitar, but as soon as he gets a new guitar, he wants another new guitar. I told there was a Facebook meme that I ran across last night, and it said something about him or her. She says, how many guitars do you need? And he says, why, do you know somebody that's selling some? I mean, I think I've got 5 guitars, 6 guitars, something like that. Not too many compared to a lot of guitar players. But you know what? My happiness is not going to come based on a guitar. I mean, will I enjoy it? Absolutely. Will it bring me joy when I play it? Absolutely. But is that the source of my joy? Lord, I hope not. Because the truth is, if it's the source of my joy, somebody can steal my joy, because I've had one guitar stolen in my life. We can't place our happiness in things, in stuff, because it can be taken away from us. And then there are those people who never seem to be happy because they're angry all the time. I knew a woman like that once. She was not happy if she was not at somebody's throat. And really, she wasn't happy then. She acted happier. But she really wasn't happy then because she wasn't happy with herself. She wasn't happy with who she was. And as people of faith, we are called to be happy. But not happy because we're going to make other people miserable. Happiness cannot come with people or emotions or things. None of those are going to work. Cindy and I watch a lot of the television show The Big Bang Theory. There are things about the show I don't like, but there's things about every show just about that I don't like. But this show I laugh at, and last Monday, Labor Day, while we were in Lufkin, we binge watched Big Bang Theory on DVD. And there was an episode where, in a previous episode, Leonard had come up, the character Leonard would come up with a hypothesis that he's a physicist, and he came up with a hypothesis, and then he got the other central character, Sheldon, involved with it, and they worked together on this hypothesis. And it became a big deal in the scientific community. And then it started being published in different scientific journals. And one day, it was published in Scientific American, which is an actual, real scientific journal that has some notoriety to it. And Leonard's name, the guy that came up with the ideas, is never mentioned in the article. And he becomes pretty angry, and he becomes angry with Sheldon because Sheldon did have a part in Leonard's not being mentioned in it. Now, cut to the episode we were watching, and Leonard is in his fiance's apartment, Penny, and Penny says, I'm going to take you shopping, because that's Penny's answer when Penny's unhappy, is always to go shopping. And so she gets her iPad out, and she's going to take him shopping on the internet, and Leonard tries to play it down, says it's her deal, not his, and she says, no, my baby's not happy, and I'm going to make him happy again. With an iPad, with a helicopter you can control with an iPad. The point being, Leonard starts to get some happiness now because of what he's about to get. But his happiness is still in something, in a thing, a materialistic thing. And contrary to what the advertising industry wants us to think, happiness is not going to come out of all of those things. The person who's always angry is going to stay angry. The person who's always wanting something is going to keep wanting something. And yeah, you'll probably hear me say, I want a guitar from time to time. Cindy's shaking her head no. I mean, you're going to probably hear me say that because I'll see a guitar that I like. It doesn't mean I'm going to get it here. And it doesn't mean that's where my joy is going to come from. It doesn't mean that it takes that to make me happy. Because it won't happen through things, through stuff. And people who are never satisfied are still not going to be satisfied. Our satisfaction does not lead to happiness. Andrew Griffin is a person who thought that he would be the same, be like that he would find a way to be happy, and that he was going to look for that job to do that was going to make him happy, the school that he wanted to go to, and he worked hard to get into the school that he wanted, and he wanted to take theater and be in acting and become a star. He thought that would make him happy. And he said, before his freshman year was over, he realized that wasn't going to make him happy. He wasn't happy doing the thing he thought would bring him joy. It didn't happen. And he was angry. He was angry with himself, and he was angry with God. Why did God let him waste all this time and money on something that wasn't going to make him happy? And he said he thought maybe he heard God speak to him that you could find your joy in me, but he really wasn't ready to listen. So Andrew kept on in his current path. So he found something new that he was going to bring him his joy. He found a girl. And Andrew moved to another state, transferred to another university, was working 2 jobs, trying to go to school, all to make this girl happy. He pushed everybody else out of his life, all to make her happy. And then they broke out. And finally, he prayed. And he heard God say to him, "You're not going to be happy outside of me." And that's true for all of us. Andrew went on to say that he's had failures since then, that he's quit things, that he's had bad relationships and breakups, but he hasn't lost that joy, because the joy doesn't come from other people, it doesn't come from things, it comes from God. Our lesson this morning is in Paul's letter to the Philippians. It says, "Be glad in the Lord." Now, if I read that from several other translations, it would say, in the words that we're the most familiar with, it would say, "Rejoice in the Lord always." Again, I say rejoice. Rejoice. But Paul's telling us where that joy has to come from. That it's not going to come from me getting a yellow Dodge Charger or a new guitar. It's not going to come from the relationships I have. They can add to the joy, but they are not the source of my joy. Because the source of our joy has to be God himself. And when the source of our joy is God, we can give our joy away, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, but it can't be stolen from us. Friends, God is the source of joy. Joy should be the hallmark of people of faith. We cannot go around the world. Now, I'm not saying you got to go around the world with a smile plastered on your face all the time. I don't do that. My face isn't muscled that way. But I also need to work at not looking like I'm angry, especially when I'm not. We've got to be people who show joy to the world. We sing that hymn at Christmas time, but all too often we don't show that hymn, the words of that hymn in the actions that we make as we go through life. And Paul reminds us, not only do we rejoice in the world, but that our gentleness needs to be shown to all people. We cannot be those people who are constantly running everybody else in the world down on Facebook or in the real world. We have to be people who are lifting others up, not putting them down. Because in that joy, we want them to experience the joy that we have. Paul also says to be anxious about nothing. That kind of harkens back to what we talked about last week. To not be worried about anything. And when we're anxious, we worry. And God tells us that we have nothing to worry about. God's in control. And if we're getting our joy from God, we have no reason to be anxious. Because we realize that the source of our joy is in control. And Paul says to send your prayers and your petitions. And we talked about that last week as well. That when we're worried, instead of worrying, we need to pray. And speaking of last week, I challenged you last week to pray 7. That was what I named the challenge. Find 7 people who are not members of this church, at least not active members, or active members of any church, that can use what this church has to offer, and pray for them daily. Your 7 people. And at 7 o'clock each night, if you can't, pray at some other point, but pray for 7 minutes for those 7 people and for your church. It's not a hard challenge. I challenge you for the month of September to do just that. Because I believe that while we are often anxious about what happens in our church and the condition of our church right now, if we are faithful in prayer, it will make a difference. Somebody ought to say amen. Amen. We need to be people who bring our prayers and petitions before God. And Paul reminds us that when we do all of that, when we let our gentleness show, when we're anxious about nothing, when we bring our prayers and our petitions before God, that the peace that passes understanding, peace beyond what we can understand or what we can place in words, is going to rest in our hearts and in our minds. We know who's in control. It's not us. It's not any of us. But we know that God is at work. And where we find that peace, we will find joy. And we'll find true happiness. I thought a long time about this sermon, and have been particularly what I'm about to share now. I want to tell you that I believe God wanted me to preach this sermon because some of you needed to hear it, but mostly because I needed to hear it. I needed to hear what God had to say through the preparation of this sermon. I needed to hear what I was saying as I delivered the sermon. The words needed to not just come out of my mouth, they needed to go back into my ears. Because you see, while I have tried very hard in the last several months to keep my anger tucked away, I have been very angry. And some of you may have seen some evidence of that, and if you have, I apologize. I believe that God has called me to repent of my anger. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details about that, but if you've seen that, please, I apologize. Because it shouldn't have been something that happened. But my family who's here this morning, they've heard more of it than you have. And I want to apologize to them as well. And I want to ask you to pray for me. Pray for me that I want to turn loose of this anger. And pray for me that I will turn loose of it. Because he said, I told you a while ago that no one can take your joy. That's no one can take your joy unless if you let them. And I came to the conclusion this week that I've let some folks take my joy. You know, it's easy to get angry. It's a lot harder to let it go.
Yeah.
But what's even harder to do is to have anger and joy coexist in your life. They can't. I would say that it's probably impossible. I need you to help me. If you see something that makes it sound like that anger's kind of stirring up, say something to me. Preacher, you're letting it out again. You need to let it go. Because I believe that I need my joy. I want it back. Paul's first words in this lesson are about joy. Paul's last words in the lesson are about peace. They coexist, but they only coexist when we let both of them in and we push the other things out. I had the children and got children of all ages, I guess, sing the last song. I'm going to ask you to join me for another one, but I don't think we've got the words to it either, do we? I didn't think so. But you'll at least know some of the words to it. It's not a particularly prayerful song necessarily, but it is a song that, an old camp meeting song that I believe expresses a lot of this, and I'd ask you to join me in singing Peace Like a River.